A brand new Cat D8 dozer costs $500,000, and right now, across America, contractors are walking past them on dealer lots and driving home to restore machines that are 40 years old. That is not nostalgia, that is arithmetic. The EPA Tier 4 final emissions mandate, the regulation that governs every new heavy dozer sold in the United States, introduced a system so complex, so prone to failure, and so expensive to repair that it has fundamentally changed the economics of owning a machine. Dale Hutchins, 57, has been clearing land outside Bakersfield, California since 1991. He bought a 2021 Cat D8 on a commercial lease. 18 months later, his machine sat idle on a job site for 74 days, not because of operator error, not because of abuse, but because of a component failure in a system that didn't exist on dozers 20 years ago. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why that happened and why the number Dale's dealer quoted him should change the way every equipment operator in this country thinks about their next purchase. And we'll come back to one specific number, $4,200, because it explains why independent mechanics across America are turning this work away entirely. There are approximately 180,000 small and mid-size heavy equipment contractors operating in the United States. The vast majority own between 1 and 5 machines. For these operators, a single piece of equipment is not a line item, it is the business. The average cost of an unplanned Tier 4 emission system failure on a heavy dozer is $28,000 to $34,000 in parts and labor. That figure does not include downtime. It does not include lost contracts. It does not include the cost of renting replacement equipment while your machine sits in a dealer's service bay. For Dale Hutchins, the total impact was not the repair bill. The total impact was 74 days of lost production at a daily contract rate of $890. That is $65,860 in revenue his business did not generate, while his machine sat waiting for a DEF injector that was back-ordered from the manufacturer. The villain in this story is not CAT. It is not the dealer. It is a regulatory and engineering system that was designed to reduce diesel emissions, a legitimate goal, but whose implementation created a maintenance burden that the industry was never built to absorb. The EPA Tier 4 final standard, fully enforced from 2015 onward, required all off-road diesel engines above 174 horsepower to meet near-zero particulate and NOx emission levels. The only viable technology to achieve those levels at scale was selective catalytic reduction, the DEF system, combined with diesel particulate filters and exhaust gas recirculation. Together, these systems added complexity that simply did not exist in earlier machines. But this is only the surface layer. Dale's 74 days of downtime, hold that number. It comes back at the end, and what it reveals about the economics of this industry is not what most people expect. The Cat D8 has been in continuous production since 1935. For the better part of a century, it was considered one of the most mechanically straightforward machines in heavy industry. A diesel engine, a torque converter, a set of tracks. Field serviceable, rebuildable anywhere. That changed in 2015. When Tier 4 Final took effect, Cat had no choice. Every major manufacturer faced the same mandate. They engineered their machines to comply. The DEF system, the DPF, the EGR, all of it was integrated into engines that had previously been defined by their simplicity. The problem was not the engineering. The problem was what happened downstream. Independent diesel mechanics, the men who had maintained dozers in rural equipment yards and contractor shops for decades, found themselves locked out, not because they lacked skill, because Cat's Tier 4 diagnostic systems require proprietary software accessible only through authorized dealers. A fault code on a Tier 4 D8 cannot be read, cleared, or diagnosed without a CATET adapter and a dealer-issued software license. That software, that lock, that decision, it did not happen by accident. It happened because Cat, like every major OEM in heavy equipment, structured their Tier 4 service model around dealer exclusivity. Independent shops were not blocked by incompetence, they were blocked by architecture. Meanwhile, the machines that predate Tier 4, the Series 2 and Series 3 D8s built through the 1990s and early 2000s, require none of that infrastructure. A skilled mechanic with standard diesel tooling can service them in the field. That reality has created a second market that most people outside the industry don't know exists. But here's what most people get wrong. Most people assume the cost gap between old and new equipment narrows over time, that depreciation on a new machine eventually brings its operating cost in line with a restored older one. The numbers say otherwise. A 2021 Cat D8 purchased new costs between $487,000 and $520,000. That is more than the median American household earns in a full decade. On a standard commercial lease, a contractor is paying between $7,800 and $9,200 per month before they move a single cubic yard of earth. Now layer in operating costs. Fuel on a D8 runs $180 to $240 per operating day under load. Insurance runs $14,000 to $18,000 per year for a machine in that value range. And scheduled maintenance on a Tier 4 engine, DEF fluid, DPF regeneration cycles, EGR servicing, adds $22,000 to $28,000 per year in routine costs alone. That is before anything breaks. When the DEF injector failed on Dale's machine, his dealer quoted $31,400 for the repair. The parts lead time was 11 weeks. There was no independent shop within 200 miles that could legally access the diagnostic system to confirm the fault. He had one option: wait. Now compare that to a fully restored 1985 CAT D8 Series 2. Acquisition cost after professional restoration, $85,000 to $110,000. No DEF system, no DPF, no proprietary diagnostic software requirement. Field serviceable by any competent diesel mechanic. Parts available through the secondary market, often same-week delivery. Here is the counterintuitive truth. When you calculate total cost per operating hour over a 10-year ownership window, a well-maintained pre-Tier 4 D8 runs at $62 to $78 per hour. A Tier 4 D8, factoring in lease payments, scheduled maintenance, and a single major emissions system failure, runs at $134 to $168 per hour. That is a 61% premium to operate the newer machine. Remember, $4,200. That is the dealer diagnostic fee per visit, just to read fault codes on a Tier 4 machine. Independent mechanics cannot waive that cost. They cannot work around it. It is the entry toll to the service system. Which is why, across the country, contractors who understand these numbers are doing exactly what Dale Hutchins eventually did. They are selling their Tier 4 machines, absorbing the depreciation hit, and putting that capital into restored pre-emission equipment. The old D8 in the field is not a relic. It is an arbitrage opportunity that the market has not fully priced. If you have worked around heavy equipment for any length of time, if you have watched a Tier 4 machine shut down mid-job because the DEF quality sensor threw a fault, or waited 3 months for an EGR valve that should have been a 2-day fix, you already know what this video is describing. What you have never had before is the dollar-by-dollar breakdown that proves what you already knew. The contractors who understood this earliest are the ones who moved first. They are the ones currently buying pre-Tier 4 D8s for $40,000 to $60,000 before restoration. Machines that the broader market has not yet recognized as undervalued, and bringing them back to working condition for a total investment under $110,000. That is 1/5 the cost of a new machine, with none of the emissions system liability. What most people do not realize is that this window is closing. As the heavy equipment industry begins to recognize the operating cost differential between Tier 4 and pre-Tier 4 machines, the price of serviceable older D8s is rising. The machines that sold at auction for $35,000 3 years ago are now clearing $55,000 to $70,000. The arbitrage is real, and it is shrinking. Dale Hutchins' 74 days of downtime is the answer to that question. Not the $31,400 repair, not the 11-week parts wait, the 74 days. Because that is what a single emission system failure costs a one-machine operation in this industry. Which brings us to what happens next. The contractors who move on this understanding in the next 18 months will operate at a structural cost advantage over every competitor running Tier 4 iron, and that advantage compounds every time an emission system fails on someone else's machine. The equipment market does not reward sentiment. It rewards operators who read the numbers before the rest of the industry catches up. The old CAT D8 sitting in that field was never just a piece of abandoned equipment. It was a business decision waiting to be understood. And as Tier 4 repair costs continue to climb, more contractors are arriving at the same conclusion Dale did. The machine built decades ago may be the only one they can actually afford to run.